think I'll start with some description of the Fourth Tetrad, and then we can perhaps answer a few questions and then have a guided meditation. And we have these 3 hours, and we want to put them to the best use we can, and then probably have some more Q&A after the guided meditation. So now we are going to look at the Fourth Tetrad, which is focused on Dhammas. And in this case, Dhamma, which is a very versatile word, is referring to principles of the way things actually work, principles of the doctrine of Buddhism. And it's fairly straightforward. The Buddha is encouraging us now. We'll recall that these instructions come after we've been present with and working at calming the body and feelings, and present with the mind itself, and going into some level of stillness or immersion. And then this is the most fruitful time to reflect upon the Dhamma. However, there are other times as well, as we've noted earlier. Sometimes using reflection on the Dhamma principles actually helps us move into more calm, stillness, samadhi. So here with these 4 instructions, the Buddha begins by drawing our attention to impermanence, to anicca, to the constant changing of conditions, the uncertainty, the fact that everything subject to arising is subject to cessation. Once a living being is born, it's absolutely certain that they will die. Now, we might notice that there are other religions and philosophies that would like to believe that that is not the case. But the Buddha continually reinforced that regardless of whatever realm a living being is in, they will pass away from that realm eventually and take up a new existence or realize nibbana and go completely cool, ending suffering. So anicca, looking at impermanence, this is often a breakthrough point to stream entry, or what arises at that moment of insight into stream entry, or leading to stream entry, marking the entering of the stream. When you reflect upon impermanence, this can be done really by looking at anything around us, including the body, noticing that any part of the body can fail at any time. That if we look at the body as elements, we can imagine those elements returning back to their collection, you might say, earth to earth, water to water, fire to fire, air to air, space to space. And that's the dissolution, the dissolving of the body. Buddha often used the language of when the body breaks up. So anicca, reflecting on anicca, can be a reflection on that, can be a reflection on anything that's around you, of how it won't last, including any process, feelings, thoughts. The Buddha often said, "Sabbe sankhara anicca." all things, all sankhara, all conditioned things are impermanent. That means everything except nibbana. So it's easy to find the examples to reflect upon. And this reflection isn't analytical. Reflection on Dhamma in this way is contemplative. So there are thoughts, but it's not about reasoning with the analytical mind. It's about bringing that thought into mind and allowing it to be worked upon at a more intuitive level. And this is really an aid to insight arising. That the truth of the Dhamma is really accessible from within, going inside. This is why the samadhi is important for realization. And so it's that open connection to the depth of wisdom that makes it possible to see things in a completely different way, which is what happens. Our view onto life, when we are still dealing with greed, hatred, and delusion, with this sense of self, identity, and ownership, it's this distortion, but it's the distortion that is universally held among humans, among beings. And it's when we are able to let go of that and see completely differently, see things as they actually are. Ever-changing processes that we can neither own or identify as self. So the other part of that, there's the two lines that are often seen together in the suttas, the sabbe sankhara anicca, sabbe dhamma anatta, all things. In that case, dhamma is all things, including nibbana, are not self. So these are the realizations that come from this process of really reflecting upon, observing these key points of the Buddhist teachings, of the way things work. And we're doing this as we're aware of our in-breath and out-breath, just like all the other instructions, keeping us connected to the body, to that basic perspective from mindfulness. This is very conducive to contemplation and being able to stay in that contemplative sort of zone rather than transitioning into analysis, trying to figure it out. Doesn't lead to a completely different way of seeing. And each some level of understanding or accepting anicca makes the next instruction, working with viraga, possible. And the word viraga is translated, it has a number of different possible translations. So if you look at the Polytext Society dictionary, you'll see a list. It could be translated as dispassionateness or even indifference. towards something. Disgust, an absence of passions, or an absence of desires, a destruction of passions, waning, fading away, which is the choice that Bhante Sujato made here, cleansing, purifying, emancipation, and it can even imply or be translated as arahantship. I really like the choice of fading away because it follows the kind of realization or acceptance of anicca very well. And think about what is fading away at this point. If we look at viraga, it's that fading away of desire and attachment, of passion. And what comes upon the heels of the fading away is nirodha. Here it's translated as cessation. Other words that are found as in the dictionary for this, for nirodha, is even oppression or suppression, destruction or annihilation. Cessation feels much softer and you might say natural. And so I think, again, it's a really good choice. But when we look at the list of synonyms or ways of describing these Pali terms, that gives us a more well-rounded view of the way these words are used and what they could mean in our experience, where this is happening in our experience, and we can go, okay, that's what they're talking about. That kind of fading away, or that kind of viraga, nirodha kind of sequence. And then the final instruction, when we're practicing in and out breathing, being present with our in-breath and our out-breath, is translated here as letting go. Patini saga. Patini saga. And it can be giving up, a way of giving up, or renouncing, renunciation, or it could be translated as forsaking something or rejection. But letting go, I think, again, is a good choice. So if we look at this, this is like a sequence that can naturally occur. And you know, one of the similes that I really like, I heard from Bhante Analayo. He said that when he was training in Sri Lanka, you know, staying in a dwelling and walking with his bowl to receive his food every day. And it happened that some lay people had offered this beautiful cloth, batik, bright colors, really beautiful, to the monastery. And someone had put it over a table that was outside. And he said as he would walk by, he would really be taken by the beauty of it and the bright colors and the design. And he would notice it every day as he walked by. But he said over time, with the rain and the sun, it gradually faded. Till he said, eventually it's like an old rag that you just feel like throwing away. And he used that as a way of talking about this fading away, as an image that we can understand. It's like when we really see the impermanence of something, the the dukkha in having any kind of identification with it, and the reality that it can never be me or mine, then our interest in it, our passion for it fades away. It's natural. We're just not clinging or grasping for it, desiring it anymore. And it doesn't change like the cloth did, but our understanding of its true nature changed. And it's when there's real insight around this, it's not depressing or sad or dull or dejected. It's joyous. It's a relief. I don't need to make effort to try to keep this bright. I don't have to make an effort to try to keep this from changing. I don't have to make an effort to, view this as me or mine. It's really a relief and joyous. And that's because the suffering ceases. So what's the next step with, Nirodha? The suffering, the stress is what ceases. Yes, the object will also fade out of existence and disappear at some point, transform into something else. But the relief comes from the cessation of our clinging, and then the letting go. Renunciation usually involves a choice, but I think I like letting go because it's this natural result. It's kind of like we got on the bus of mindfulness, and as we go through all these steps, when we get to a certain level of skill or proficiency or familiarity, or we put in the causes and conditions to the point where we start to really see these things, it falls like dominoes hitting one another. It's like, it's just gonna happen. The letting go is natural and not forced. And I really, in my experience, I feel like that's been the most productive way of developing, to investigate, to keep the precepts, to practice meditation, practice something like Anapanasati, and then observe how we feel when we stop craving and clinging to things. We can let them go. Usually for me, that's more solid than if I force myself. And it's like, but I have to have the determination to really practice with seeing this the way it actually is. Really acknowledging the suffering that's involved and the gratification as well. Why do I feel gratification, or what is really behind the craving and clinging? What is the gratification, and can I really look candidly, honestly at the danger, so that I know why really feel the naturalness, the natural inclination to let go, to let that desire fade. And this is something that's not available to us if we continue to follow our habits. So this is why the Buddha gave these reflections that he encouraged us to frequently reflect upon, frequently take into account. And one of them is, am I letting go of my habits? Am I changing my habits? Because we have such strong habits of action and the way we think and the way we view things, that even when a realization comes, sometimes we just go back to the old way of thinking because the habit is so strong. And the world is pulling us in that direction also, whether that comes through the people in our life or circumstances or, this very strong buildup of what we should be valuing and how we should present ourselves. And when that starts to crumble, it's important to be aware of that and not just go back to the same habits. To really see that going against the grain is the way to happiness. I think there's more that I want to share with you around the way the mindfulness of in and out breathing. We'll just revisit some of the things we talked about before and kind of like wrap it up with, how this fulfills the four foundations of mindfulness and how we can use this as a support for the development of the 7 factors of enlightenment.